Hello everyone, and boy did that last video explode. Now, if the algorithm brought you here and you don't know what prior video I'm talking about because this is the first time you've clicked on my face, well, over here should be a image with a link in description and a clickable link to my previous video, which is called Farewell Xbox. It was a big venty ranty discussion on why I'm disappointed in Xbox now, why I'm basically just done with Xbox, and also an attempt to get people to think a bit more broadly in with my speculation. I did not expect it to explode as much as it did, and I know maybe almost 6K views isn't really exploding on YouTube, but considering my channel, that's as good as going viral for me. So the first thing I want to do is thank everyone that clicked on that video, even if you disliked it, even if you clicked it just to have a comment that was very negative. Hey, thanks anyway, because you gave me a boost in the algorithm. And the guy that told me to put down the video games and go to the gym, well, thank you, because I'd been putting off the gym for weeks, and your comment really pushed me to start going back to the gym this week. So hey, cool stuff. Now, I'm releasing this video like a week later, but I don't plan to do these unscripted things that often. So I just want to make sure it's known that I'm not just going to keep hammering these out, and I'm not going to keep hammering on the topic of Xbox specifically and why I'm leaving, but I did want to address certain items regarding that video. So if you're only here for the console warrior stuff, then click on the timestamp below and you'll be taken right to that conversation. Before then, I just want to talk about some of the stuff of the last video, addressing some of the comments and other things. So if you're returning from the last video and you were the kind of person that said, just play games, just who cares about this, that, or the other thing, just play games, just play it. If all that matters to you is that you're having fun, then that's fine. But from my perspective, I understand these are just games. I understand they're a luxury item. I do love this medium, though. It is a hobby. It's not like the most important thing in my life, obviously, but it is high up there because I love games so much. I wanted to make them. I would still love to try and make a game of my own one day, but until then, I talk about games. If you look at my channel, even games that I like, I dig into and I figure out, okay, here's what doesn't work, here's why people might not be into it, and yet here's what I think does work about the game. I love that stuff. That stuff to me is fun, and it makes games more fun. I can play a game I don't like and still get some value out of it because I do that kind of thinking. If all that matters to you is whether or not you're having fun, then just instead of clicking this video, instead of leaving a comment and boosting me in the algorithm, on the YouTube homepage, there are 3 little dots near a video, and you can click that and say, don't recommend channel. And I recommend you do that for any video that does not look to be in your alley. That's the best way to cultivate your algorithm on YouTube. For everyone else, even if your comment wasn't really supportive, but wasn't negative either, it was constructive, we'll call it, then thank you very much. I tried to read all of the comments, at least the ones that I got notifications for. A lot of the replies you guys had to each other, I only got to skim because I don't get notifications for those. But I really am grateful for everyone that clicked, everyone that commented, everyone that liked or even disliked, because it all boosted the algorithm and made that video my most successful, I think. Now, to address some of the actual feedback in that video, the day after I uploaded, I was reminded that, yes, it's Microsoft Game Studios now. Even before anyone commented, I saw it's Microsoft Game Studios now, and that's right, it's Microsoft Game Pass now, and the whole grounding of my speculation in my video was that Xbox and Microsoft are 2 different entities, right? Now, I don't think it completely dismisses everything I said, especially when you combine it with someone had the comment that Phil Spencer's on the Microsoft board. Just because you're on the board doesn't mean you get to be listened to. It's kind of like a holiday dinner. Just because you have a seat at the table with all the other grown-ups doesn't mean any of the other grown-ups are listening to you. What the name change to Microsoft Game Studios, what the name change to Microsoft Game Pass could be is Microsoft themselves could have decided that the console game is just not what they're interested in anymore. They could be moving to push the hardware aspect out, and they could be a multi-year plan. Because one of the things I forgot to mention was the possibility of internal politics. Microsoft might be a big corporation, but it's made up of a lot of individuals. And within each of those departments, you can imagine they have different competing interests and different egos that are constantly clashing. What if there's several departments that are actually jealous of the leeway that Xbox is giving despite being a money sink? what if other departments feel like they're not getting the budget that they want because over here Xbox is getting all this bailout money, right? I mean, imagine if you're part of these departments, you're not getting the budget you feel you need, and all of a sudden, $69 billion to Activision Blizzard. Even at the shareholders table, that could cause some arguments in politics. So there's a lot of stuff that we don't get to see or know going on at Microsoft, and the only reason I want to ask these questions and propose these speculations is to get people thinking, right? Because again, my issue is the myopic perspective. There's a lot of pie in the sky solutions, and people aren't really looking at things from the broader perspective. Like there's so many questions you're not asking. Like everyone, or maybe instead of the broader perspective, it's better to say the perspective is too simplistic. There's a lot of factors at play that we can only speculate at, but I think that speculation does a better job of helping explain why things are happening the way they're happening than simply believing a corporation's evil because shareholders are greedy. I mean, are shareholders greedy? Most of the time, yes, but I think that's still an oversimplification. And to that end, I still think taking the long view, because someone mentioned a comment, like it cost Microsoft a ton of money with those 360s to replace all of them, but by the end they were still generating a profit. But how much more of a profit could they have generated? That's part of the question, right? And then even if they generated a profit with a 360, Xbox One happened. So you have all of these other factors that Microsoft's been having to pay for Xbox for a long time still. So at this point, it could be Microsoft wants to push Xbox into just being a software division, part of its other devices. They're more interested in the xCloud, and it could be that's what our boy Phil is telling Microsoft, right? That what he's telling us, what Phil and Sarah and Aaron and Mike and all, or Matt rather, are telling us is stuff that they think we want to hear in the short term, but in the long term, they are really trying to push xCloud. They are really trying to push all digital on all platforms, and they're just taking a really long plan towards it. Anyways, I've already gone on in that topic long enough. Addressing one more thing, one of the first comments let me know that Helldivers is not a third party. The Helldivers property itself is Sony owned. I was not aware of that. I thought Arrowhead owned Helldivers and it was just being published by Sony. I did not know that Sony owned Helldivers, the IP. It only changes some of what I was saying though, because they basically said there was no first party titles coming out this year. Like PlayStation themselves said no first party titles in 2024, or at least this fiscal year. So I guess second party is where it counts because Arrowhead is not owned by them. And as a result, if Sony owns Helldivers, then Arrowhead doesn't have to be the studio that makes another Helldivers. So if there's ever Helldivers 3, it could quite possibly be done by another studio. But the last comment or at least the last kind of comment that I will address is going to lead into the actual topic of today. Now, they weren't the only person that posted it, because you could tell there are some people that are clearly Xbox fans trying to trash me, or there were people that were blatantly PlayStation fans that were picking fights. But there was one comment that said, PlayStation is king, and that really, because yeah, I mean, it's meant to be a compliment, but the thing about kings is they can easily become tyrants. And this is why... I mean, I was surprised in some ways to see console war talk in my comments. Just like a few years ago, I remember seeing the term Xbot on social media, and I was just startled to see the term still exists. When it comes to console wars, I mean, the only thing I have to ask console warriors is, what do you benefit from being a console warrior? What do you benefit from being so loyal and devoted to this corporation that you fight for them? What benefit do you have to defend them rather than criticize them? What benefit do you gain being a console warrior? And this isn't just to PlayStation, this is also to Microsoft, because I think people might have misunderstood me as being an Xbox fanboy. And the thing is, my decisions for what console I get are always based on what I think is best for the player base. Okay, well, actually, it's based on what I think is best for me before I think is what's best for the player base. Let's be honest. I mean, if we really trace back, I was a Super Nintendo kid. I love the Super Nintendo. My friend had a Genesis. I didn't really care for Mortal Kombat. I like Street Fighter better. I didn't care for Sonic the Hedgehog, and I still don't. But the thing is, there were games on the Genesis I liked. I liked Toe Jam and Earl. I was very interested in Shining Force. There was stuff that had my interest. It just wasn't as much as what the Super Nintendo had. I thought I was going to get a Nintendo 64, but then Final Fantasy moved over to the PlayStation. Squaresoft was my favorite company. My favorite games are role-playing games. I love Final Fantasy, I love Chrono Trigger, I love Secret of Mana. So of course, Final Fantasy VII goes to PlayStation. I'm following suit. Bye-bye Nintendo. By the time next generation rolls around, I'm in high school, I'm working at GameStop, I'm able to get a used GameCube and Xbox at a discount, and I had already gotten a PS2. Well, it turns out my favorite games are all on the GameCube and the Xbox. But then the next generation rolls around, and what do? I get an Xbox 360, but I don't get it until the summer after it releases. I don't get it until after the PlayStation 3 announcement. Why? Because the PlayStation 3 announcement was an embarrassment. But why was the PlayStation 3 announcement an embarrassment? Because Sony took their audience for granted, which is what Nintendo did with the N64. Let's be honest, like Nintendo just assumed they were going to win. In fact, you know what? One of my favorite books, let me grab it. One of my favorite books, Console Wars. Great thing about this is you get a really good glimpse at Nintendo and Sega, and it's mostly, honestly, it's like Sega is posed as the good guys, or at least Sega of America is posed as the good guys in this. Nintendo, they kind of look like the bad guy a lot of times. And, I mean, it just goes to show that, we'll put you there for a bit. It just goes to show that, you know, all of these companies have problems, they all have issues, and they all have an ego. The more successful you are, the more impregnable you think you are. The most important thing about Tom Kalinske bringing Sega of America to the front is that they gave Nintendo competition. Nintendo forced, retailers and stuff to do things their way because that was the only way. And third-party game developers were getting frustrated with Nintendo. So a competitor comes along and the retailers rejoice, the third-party developers rejoice, and next thing you know, what happens? The PlayStation happens because Sega started to screw up. Nintendo started to regain traction after Sega started catching up. So Sony comes in and they offer another good deal for retailers and for third-party developers, and Nintendo, the N64 does not do as well as the Super Nintendo did. The GameCube did not do as well as the Super Nintendo did, right? The thing is, PlayStation 2 was able to hold on to that audience. And it didn't matter that they weren't the best hardware. They were able to hold on to that audience because they still had the most number of third-party developers and the greatest variety of games. But like Nintendo, they got too cocky. They got too conceited. And so what happens? PlayStation 3 happens. I get an Xbox 360 not because I'm a Xbox fanboy. I get an Xbox 360 because it's not going to be a giant piece of trash like the PS3 started as. But the PS3 became good. That's the thing. Like, eventually, I got a PS3 Slim. I enjoyed Infamous 1 and 2. I enjoyed Resistance 3. I had all three systems after a time. And then the next generation, even though I didn't buy them, like I got a PS4, I got a Wii U, and not until the end of the generation did I get an Xbox One, which was a mistake. And then I chose this generation to get an Xbox Series X. But at this point, I'm tired of the console, of the whole console war, and I'm tired of trying to place bets because now I feel like I, as a customer, am being taken for granted. And that's one of the reasons why I'm not happy with PlayStation, but I'm not happy with Xbox. And I took a gamble on Xbox. I did take a gamble on Xbox this generation, but I didn't do it because I think PlayStation is a trash brand or anything. I don't think Xbox is inherently superior to PlayStation. I did it because I wanted competition. I didn't want Sony to take me for granted. I didn't want Sony to exploit me. And this is why I do not understand console warriors. This is why I do not understand, especially at this age. I mean, once upon a time, I kind of was one because I let my bias get the better of me. But these days, I mean, even Nintendo, like I'm almost a guaranteed sucker to get a Switch successor, but I still need to see what it is. I still need to see the price point, and I still need to see what's available because at this point, it's so expensive. And I'm so sick of having to deal with all these extra features that don't improve anything. I'm sick of all these gimmicks, and I'm sick of the corporations trying to force me into a certain kind of behavior. It's actually one of the things where I remember seeing the first previews of what the PlayStation 5 operating system was going to be, and it felt like they were they were trying to fix what wasn't broken. And it's all because they wanted to steer people to a specific experience instead of giving me options. They call it options, but they're not. But that's one thing. But in the end, the name of the game is the game, and it really is that Xbox doesn't have games, and when they finally had a good game, they closed the studio because it wasn't the right game for the corporation. Now, PlayStation, you have to admit, is doing some equally bad things because they tried to have a ton of live service titles, which it blows the mind because you're the Ouroboros eating your own tail at that point. You have to cannibalize on your own self if you expect, like, you only have so many players. They're not going to play every live service you got. Right? They can't do dailies in 8 stinking games. And even if you're trying to hit different markets, that's still like you're expecting incredible success. I'm starting to get a little bit off topic. My point being that a lot of these companies aren't making good decisions for the consumer. And that's where, again, what is the benefit of being a console warrior? All you do is benefit the corporation. And the corporations need to be fighting for your dollar. All right? Your dollar should not be taken for granted. You should not today be saying you're going to be buying a PlayStation 6 without knowing what that PlayStation 6 even is. Xbox is announcing another console, and there are people out there that are going to buy it because it's another Xbox console. And there are people out there that are going to buy the Switch successor because it's another Nintendo console. The best thing for you as a consumer is to wait and to measure your options and to not have absolute corporate loyalty. Now, this is nothing new. This is not a new topic. Ford versus Chevy, for example. Apple versus IBM before it became Apple versus Windows. You always have these kinds of customer loyalty and arguments. I mean, people even have it with fast food, right? Like McDonald's versus Burger King versus Wendy's, right? Pizza Hut versus Domino's versus Papa John's are all inferior to a real style pizza place from like the New York, New Jersey, Philly area. Good pizza. The best thing for someone to be right now is a PC player, with the exception that you don't have physical media. The only benefit to a console in this day and age really is that you can still get physical media. And even then, they're trying to wipe it out. The next Xbox is allegedly not going to have a physical drive. The PlayStation 5 has the digital option that they clearly want to sell more of, because digital only gives the corporation more control over what you can play. And this is why, again, don't be a console warrior, because you as the consumer need to be willing to criticize everything the corporation is doing. And if you criticize them, but then go and buy their product, what impetus do they have to change? If there is no threat to their bottom line, then all of your complaints mean nothing, because you'll complain and you'll whine and you'll take it anyway. And that's the follow-up I wanted to have to the last video, because I had a bias for Xbox, and I'm willing to admit that, but my bias was based in a nostalgia for an old system and an old team that has not existed for 20 years. And I was honest about that. I had a bias, and I also went for Xbox because I wanted Sony to have competition. I wanted PlayStation to be forced with competition that would make them go back on the decisions that I did not like. I didn't want them to take me for granted. I wanted them to try and fight for me. But at the end of the day, Xbox themselves didn't fight hard enough. They shot themselves in the foot over and over again, and that hurt competition. And again, looking at the Switch successor, I mean, I play docked, so for me, it's not like the Steam Deck is competition for it. I still play it like a home console, but the Steam Deck is definitely competition for whatever comes next, because the Steam Deck offers an entire library, like your entire library, that can go back several generations. The best backwards compatibility right now is available on Steam and good old games. Even if the Switch successor is more powerful, it will have a limited library compared to what Steam offers. So what reason would I have to use the Switch successor? Again, for me, There's a few reasons, and one of them is I play docked anyway, so for me, a Steam Deck is nothing more than a smaller, lower powered PC. The Switch successor is going to promise me first party Nintendo games, and Nintendo makes enough first party Nintendo games that are good that it's honestly kind of worth owning a system for. But I need to see what that system will be and what its price point will be, because it's possible. I mean, maybe I'll get one eventually, but I might not get the next one at launch. I got a Switch at launch. I was convinced by what it could offer, and I was able to take advantage of what it could offer at the time. I don't use the portable aspect anymore, but there are plenty of people who do, but there are also plenty of people that prefer the Steam Deck. So I'm actually really curious what's going to happen with the Switch successor in regards to numbers. Will it still sell like hotcakes? Will the numbers not meet expectations? Will it be a success, but not as strong of a success? Or will it be a failure? And I'm really curious to see what Nintendo pulls out and what their strategy is, but I'm not a guaranteed customer. And that's what nobody should be. Because if I'm a fanboy of any system at this point, it is Nintendo systems. But again, I didn't get the N64. And while I got the Wii U turned out to be, I actually liked the Wii U, but it wasn't great. The Switch, I like it. The thing is, it's all about the games, because the hardware itself is never really worth writing home about, but there's just a sense of play in the operating system that Nintendo managed to have in many of their prior generations, and they designed their games with play in mind, and that's why they're the closest to something I'm a fanboy of. If Xbox is out of the hardware game, then that means the only competition for Sony is honestly the PC, because PlayStation is arguing for fidelity, whereas Nintendo is not. They're technically two different competitors, and Nintendo is now also competing with PC in that they're competing with Steam Deck. So we do have competition, just for most people. I mean, for the first time, it does look like the console game days are numbered, unless Nintendo can pull something out of their hat that the PC can't do. But I'm also not about to predict that Nintendo's going to become a third-party publisher either. Nintendo's going to be in this hardware game for as long as they can. Anyway, that's enough out of me. I put the ramble and ramble pack quite clearly. Thank you guys for watching. As always, leave a comment below, all that stuff. And I probably won't do another one of these, and the next video you'll see will be a podcast. I will be doing my Rambling with Ramble Pack podcast, and then my Darksiders 3 deep dive analysis. So, thanks everyone for watching. I hope you all have a good day.